Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Hello, Rush Nation, and welcome to the 5 Yard Dynasty podcast. I am your host, as usual, Liam, or at the FSA Tweets on Twitter. And today I am joined by Lewis, one of our 5 Yard Rush writers. He is also one of the co-hosts for the 5 Yard Rush Friday podcast. That's a tongue twister when you're trying to say it quickly. Lewis at L Venez 1. How are you doing, my friend? It's been a long time coming getting you on this show.
Yeah, I'm doing all right. Happy to join you this evening. It's always one of the shows I've really looked forward to, the Dynasty one, and it's great to be on.
It's great to have you, mate. So, listeners, today what we're going to be doing is we've been going through the 2022 end of season review. We've done quarterbacks through to tight ends. Today we're going to be looking at purely the 2022 rookies. There's no dancing around this. We've got all four positions to go through in this show, so there's going to be a lot packed in. Before we get into that, Lewis, we do a guest interview at the start of every show with every guest. So how long have you been playing football so the listeners can get to know you a little bit more?
So this was my third season that's just finished.
Third season. So not someone that's been playing for a long time. Normally I ask that question and we get, I've been playing for 20 years. I had to mail my list in and all this, but no, it's refreshing to have someone quite new. I know I had Nathan a few weeks ago on as well, who's been playing for a similar amount of time as both myself and you. So how did you get into producing content, Lewis? Because you're one of the 5 Yard writers. You're also on the Fast Action Friday podcast for us. So how did you get into doing all of that, and do you enjoy it? Is the big question.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely love it. But just going back to how long I've been playing as well, it's like it all started in lockdown, which I think there's a lot of new fantasy players that was fans of the NFL. And I seen a thing on Twitter. I think I was quite new to Twitter at the time, that Murph posted about a mock draft. And then I jumped in that. It's all his fault, basically, Murph's fault.
It's all his fault.
I play this game and, but no. And then ended up joining a Dynasty League with him. There was a space in a startup, so I joined that. And then here we are now. But it was in last off season when 5 Yard Rush were looking for writers. And I answered the call, basically. I was like, yeah, I'd love to get into it. And I had a few pieces on like a Google document that I'd been writing, specifically about Dynasty, because it was quite early in the off season. And I sent them to Rich and someone else, can't remember now. And they were like, yeah, a bit of fine tuning and whatever, just give it a go. And I got put in touch with Rob, kind of knew Rob anyway from being in that Dynasty League, that first one I joined, and here we are now.
It's a pleasure to have you in the 5 Yard family, mate. It's all for the better. But as I said, we've got a lot to get into. So before we dive into that, 2 quick notes. The first one, Tom Brady retires. I cannot go through the show without mentioning it. It happened just after, I think it was actually the day after last week's show. So Tom Brady, after 20, I can't even think. 23 years, as Lewis corrected me on. 23 years of playing. That's a long time. About the same time as I've been alive. So sorry for making you feel old if you are listening and you're not the same age as me. But quite an interesting experience, considering that he was dominant for so long, as well as what do we do now? There's no longer a top free agent quarterback. You've got Aaron Rodgers, who's potentially being traded. We have no idea. There's still news coming out today that he doesn't know what he's going to be doing next season. And the next guy down is Derek Carr, who is nowhere near on the same level as these two. So it's going to be an interesting offseason with so many quarterbacks needed by the teams across the league. So one last thing before we dive in. The end of last week's show, I gave you a brain teaser. And Lewis, I'm going to bring you in, see if you can answer it before I do pass it over to give you the answer. So last week's show was about the tight ends and the review. The brain teaser was in wide receiver rankings. Where would Travis Kelce rank if he was classed as such a wide receiver? We'll do points per game and season long. So you got 2 chances to be right, basically, and only weeks 1 to 17 because that's always what we use. So Lewis, do you have any ideas of where he could be ranked as a wide receiver last year?
Now, I was looking at this actually because I'm in one group chat. There's a couple of us and we get into some heated discussions, and it was not long ago. I think it was just after week 17, actually. So end of season, not points per game. I think he would have been wide receiver 5.
So he would have been wide receiver 4 in overall.
4.
Yeah, so you were very close. In points per game, he was actually the wide receiver 5. So
maybe it was points per game I was looking at.
So either way, you were very close. I know that Nathan got one of them bang on. So I can't remember which one off the top of my head, but yeah, that's quite insane that a tight end is putting up that many points, and then there's no one else to rival that whatsoever. Anyway, Lewis, let's dive in. That's enough chatting about random stuff. Let's get into the rookie review. So we'll start off with QBs, as I've done on this series. I'm going to quickly whiz through the order in which they're currently being drafted at, which I think is quite interesting to see, considering how everyone knew what they were being drafted last year. So you've got Kenny Pickett at QB1, Brock Purdy QB2, Bailey Zappi QB3, Desmond Ridder QB4, Malik Willis QB5, Skylar Thompson QB6, Matt Corral QB7, and Sam Howell QB8. Now, last year, some of those names at the bottom were higher up, and Brock Purdy, Bailey Zappi probably weren't even being drafted. It's quite interesting to see what a complete flip around this has been. But is there anyone that you wanted to touch on there, Lewis, before I dive in with some notes that I've made?
I mean, I'd quite like to go right to the bottom of that list with Sam Howell, to be honest, because I was so high on him when he was coming out. And I know he didn't have his best senior season, but he lost his 2 main weapons with De'Ami Brown, and the other name eludes me now. Some of his O-line, they were gone in the draft as well from the year before, when he was absolutely superb. And obviously his draft stock plummeted. It's a natural thing to happen. It does happen. But to drop as far as he did surprised me for the first start. But then we didn't get to see him until week 18, and we don't count week 18, obviously, but it would have been just under 20 points what he scored. He's got that scrambling ability to make plays or extend plays. And I really think if they wasn't on that role under Taylor Heineke, he could have got in sooner. Obviously, Carson Wentz, I thought it was a winnable job for him there, but they did get on that role and sort of push him for a playoff spot. And he should be the start next season, in my opinion.
That's a spicy take, considering he only played 1 game, and he was a 5th round rookie. Pre-draft, I was extremely excited by Sam Howell. Myself and the old co-host Rich were massively opposed on this. I had him as my QB3, I think it was, QB3 going in, and Rich basically was not having any of it. And Rich ended up being right in terms of draft capital and how the rookie seasons played out. But that 19 points in week 18 gives me a bit of hope for him. Don't think that he should be the last on this list.
No.
I mean, guys like Skylar Thompson. I mean, Matt Corral's still going ahead of him, and Matt Corral didn't play or score a single point. Skylar Thompson didn't really show anything for me whatsoever. I think that he's just going to be relegated to a career backup, which is better than what he was this season, where he was the third QB on the Dolphins there. But I don't see much for him. A guy that was being touted to be going QB1 pre-draft was Malik Willis, and everyone was really high on him specifically, and it didn't turn out that way. As we now know, Kenny Pickett was the only one to get first-round capital, and the rest went in the third round or lower. So for me, I think Tannehill needs to be moved on from for Willis to have any sort of value. I think if you think that's going to happen, go buy some Willis. But if not, don't bother. I don't think they're going to move on from Tannehill just because there's nothing for them to move on to. Willis hasn't shown enough for them to move on. And I don't know how you feel about that, Lewis, but it just doesn't feel like a move a GM would make, especially a new GM that's just come in.
No, absolutely not. And if you just look purely at his 3 NFL games where he played 100% of the snaps, right? Week 8 and week 9, they ran the ball so much. I think it was 16 pass attempts in week 9 and even less than that, maybe 10, maybe 9 pass attempts in week 8, his first start. But you had Derrick Henry rushing the ball 30 odd times. And then week 16 was the only other look that we got at him properly. And even with him throwing the ball more and things like that, he ended up benched 2 interceptions that game. So obviously he fell down the NFL draft. So it's hard to gauge with such little usage this season what we can get from him in the future. But it doesn't look good.
No, and another guy that didn't really show enough was Desmond Ridder. Now, I think this one was a tough one because I predicted, rightly predicted, that by the Falcons bye week in week 14 that he would end up being named the starter, and he would actually get 3 games to kind of prove himself, and that's exactly what they did. I hoped it would be earlier, but it didn't. And I wanted to bring this up, and Lewis is smiling.
Yes, I was waiting for it.
He knows exactly what I'm going to say, and the only reason I brought him up is at the UKFFC last year, Lewis told me in a rookie draft that we're in the middle of to pick Desmond Ridder because he promises, and I quote, he promises that Desmond Ridder will become the starting QB by, was it week 6 or week 8? One of the two.
By week 6, yeah.
By week 6. And it didn't happen until week 15 would have been the first starting game. So that aside, now that I've roasted a bit of Lewis, he didn't show enough, but I also don't think he had enough time. Where do you see Ridder's future going right now? Because, as I said, I just don't think he showed enough.
Yeah, he never. But I thought he would get the job a lot sooner. Obviously, I said by week 6. And if it wasn't for the Falcons winning in such a poor division where they thought they could take it down, I think he would have still got in a lot sooner, possibly by week 6. But, you know, he didn't throw a touchdown until week 18. Obviously, we don't count that. It's no good to us. There's a strong chance Atlanta could move on. But he was quite raw coming out, and I'd like to see him get a fair crack at it, to be honest. But I do believe they could move on, whether it's a vet or, you know. But
yeah, I see the same. I think, as you said, they got sucked into the playoff race, being in such a poor division and winning a good amount of games to get within a shot of having some sort of playoff aspirations. I think that's what really hindered him, and therefore his career is going to be maybe a backup role with the chance of showing himself, kind of like a Geno, maybe showing himself to become something, or being something like a Chase Daniel that is just a career backup. I feel for the kid because I really liked him coming out as well. I'm going to pick on Brock Purdy as the last quarterback before we dive into the running backs and wide receivers. We've got so many to talk about. Brock Purdy, I mean, he had completely blown the expectations out of the water because the expectations were nothing. He was selected as Mr. Irrelevant, the last pick in the draft. There was no real expectations, as I said. He was the QB3 on the team behind a guy that the San Francisco 49ers traded up their complete future for in Trey Lance. And then they also they also kept Jimmy G on their roster as the veteran QB2 behind Lance. And somehow both of them got injured, and Purdy ended up starting not just one game, but a good portion of the season. What I wanted to talk about with Purdy is he was just behind Kenny Pickett in terms of points per game across the whole season, which was QB 35. And that's minimum 4 games as you usually do. But when you think about what Purdy actually did, because he played in 3 games where in 2 of them, he didn't even throw a pass. He was just in to hand the ball off. And in one of them, he threw like 9 passes for 4 receptions or something like that. So not a lot. I think he played a combined amount of 26% snaps in 3 games, which isn't a lot whatsoever. But when you take the week 13 up to week 18 games where Purdy became the starter and was really good, or became the focal point of that offense, he scored 18 points per game, just over. And that's equal to QB 14 if you stretch that out across the whole year. I mean, playing a bit with the numbers there, but QB 14 across that, he was higher than that in terms of during that stretch. But if you take that points per game, put it against the whole year, that's an incredible stretch for a guy that didn't have any expectations. Concerns for the future, Lewis? Trey Lance is still there. Jimmy G's gone, but Trey Lance is there, and no one knows who's going to be starting.
No, and he's going to miss. Well, he hasn't even had surgery yet, has he? But he's going to miss 6 months after surgery at a minimum. Some people longer. I've seen when I've looked into it because I'm fascinated by some of the sort of injury stuff, and some players have missed 9 months with the same injury after surgery. But he looked the real deal over them games he was starting. I know it's a QB-friendly system in San Francisco, but he was still getting it done. He would have been the QB1 out of the rookies in points per game by a country mile, by nearly 6 points. And I just really hope that he gets another chance. And he's definitely worth a stash in the Dynasty League anyway. Whether it be in San Francisco or somewhere else, I really hope he does get another chance because he deserves one.
Yeah, I think I really struggle with Purdy because no one knows what they're going to do with Lance. They traded 2 firsts to go and move up to pick Lance, and he's been injured and hasn't played the game for many years now. I think it's verging on 3. But then you've also got Purdy. It's not a bad situation for San Francisco to be in. You've got 2 young, good quarterbacks that have both run your offense well. But for fantasy purposes, it's a nightmare, and no one really knows what to do there. If you had to guess, Lewis, which side are you going on, Purdy or Lance to start the season?
I'm going to go with Trey Lance because of the injury to Purdy. If he got it done and they made it to the Super Bowl, taking down that Eagles defense, then I would have said Purdy, 100%. I think I actually tweeted that before the game. But
okay.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Trey Lance. I think it was a lot of capital to give up, draft capital to give up from them, and they haven't really seen what they could get out of him yet, have they? Either. No. So they're going to be wanting to give him another chance.
Yeah, they've only seen Lance for 5 games, so I'm with you on that. I think who ends the season is a much trickier question, and I'm not sure either of us are in a position, or anyone is in a position to answer that question. So, Lewis, let's have a look at the rookie running backs. So, with this, I'm going to split them into 2. So we're going to look at the top few, and then the rest is what I'm going to call them. So, again, how they're being drafted at the moment, and that is in January ADP. We've got Kenneth Walker, running back 1. Breece Hall, Damian Pierce as running back 3. Rashad White, running back 4. James Cook, Isaiah Pacheco, Tyler Algier, and then Brian Robinson as running back. I've somehow lost count, and there's only 8 of them, right? Yeah, running back 8. So Brian Robinson, running back 8, rounds out the first lot that I wanted to talk about. We'll throw it straight over to you, Lewis. Is there anyone that you wanted to speak about in this list that someone draws to you?
See, I really like the bottom of the list again, but I'm going to go away from that a little bit, head to the middle with James Cook, because he had that fumble in week 1 and it kind of set the tone. But the flashes when he was allowed to was very quietly good. A lot of people don't realize how good he actually was this season, because it was very in ifs and bits and whatever else, because Singletary did handle most of the stuff, but 5.7 yards per carry. And he did have quite a few carries some of them weeks, like double figures, and he still weren't the lead back. And Devin Singletary is now a free agent.
Yeah.
So for me, going forward, James Cook could, he is very, very cheap at the moment. I've been in a couple of startups, a best ball one and a normal dynasty, and I don't think you can go wrong in the later rounds, sort of, with James Cook.
No, so James Cook, it's quite interesting to see that he's so far down this list. As you said, that first touch being a fumble didn't help him whatsoever, and then the Bills also trading for Naeem Hines, couldn't think of the first name there, who is coincidentally the only other running back under contract on the Bills roster right now, as in going into the 23 season. So it's definitely quite interesting to see this sort of situation. And he's going as pick 98 in DLF ADP for January, which, if my quick maths serves me well, is roughly round 8, round 7. I mean, James Cook in round 7, I think that's a solid pick there. I don't know what other running backs are going around him, but James Cook with that wide open of an offense seems like a situation that I'd be buying up. What do you think you could trade to try and get him right now, Lewis? I think if you were to trade like a mid-second, that would probably work. A late second might even snap him up.
I think someone will snap your hand off for around a 204, to be honest, around sort of 204 to 206. And if I'd happily pay that, because at very worst case, they bring in Naeem Hines spent most of the time on special teams, as we seen with him, 2 returns that he took for a touchdown in that game. But even if they bring in another vet or they draft someone, the very worst case, you're going to get James Cook from this year. And some weeks that is flexible with a decent matchup. Yeah,
completely.
So
agree.
Send a mid-second, because you know what you got.
Yeah. I don't foresee him being a world above Devin Singletary was.
No.
But I think that he's going to be a bit more efficient than Devin Singletary. We've seen that he can do it in a passing game. And as you said, that's worst case scenario. They bring someone in. I know that it's mock season heaven right now, where everyone loves to think Bijan Robinson, the top running back in the 23 class that is incoming, is just going to go to all these great landing spots. But realistically, he can only go to one landing spot out of 32 teams. And the Bills have proven that they don't really take running backs that highly, and yet they still took James Cook in the second round. Do we think that they're then going to spend a first rounder on Bijan Robinson the following year? I don't think that's going to happen. And I don't think that Bijan Robinson's going to be there in the second for their pick. So they're going to have to trade up. No. And I don't see either of those situations happening. So you're expecting someone lower down the line, which is just going to compete for James Cook at level, if not lower draft capital, and therefore potentially even worse, which gives James Cook a big chance. A guy that I wanted to talk about a little bit was we spoke about Breece Hall on a previous episode, so I'm not going to speak about him. But Kenneth Walker, the guy going above him right now, he would be the running back 2 if Breece Hall was up for the whole year. I think that the ACL injury has, especially with how early it was, really pushed Breece Hall out of the recency bias minds that do help with ADP. Because let's face it, everyone, regardless of what they think and how much they try and push it away, will consider a bit of recency bias. And Kenneth Walker profited from the Breece Hall injury. And what I'm saying by that is, in week 7, when Breece Hall went down, Kenneth Walker was the RB3. And by Breece Hall going down, and we, as a Dynasty community, we're losing that amazing Breece Hall running back coming into the league, that amazing rookie. We kind of wanted to project that onto someone, and it just so happened Kenneth Walker had his second running back 1 game of the year, which was running back 3. I believe the other one was running back 2 the week before. So just the fact that he was on the up while Breece Hall went down kind of helped his stock. And he did return to that top 5 running back stance on a week-to-week basis only once after that period. But I think Kenneth Walker is a solid running back 2 with that upside. I think that he's a better David Montgomery in terms of he will give you solid production, but also have that ceiling. I just don't foresee Kenneth Walker being a consistent approach at top 12, for example.
I think Kenneth Walker could, obviously Breece that he would be fantastic either way whenever he gets back to his full speed. But he was only just getting going, wasn't he? And Kenneth Walker, he missed a couple games, and he was on limited snaps for a couple games and things like that early on. And he came away with 9 touchdowns, over 1,000 yards as a rookie, with that missing a few games as well. And I think that is being very, very quiet as well. Like, no one's really picking up on how good his rookie season actually was. And he was really efficient in the bell cow role. So obviously he had 4.6 yards per carry, but his before contact and after contact were quite similar. Because he's elusive, and if he can't make you miss, he will run through you instead. Like, he has it all. And I think, RB 17 in points per game, I believe, and I only see it going one way.
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue with him right now is his current cost. I mean, do we really think that I'm frantically trying to find it? He's running back 2 overall. Do we really think that he's going to be the running back 2 this time next year? I think that's my concern. I think we're trying to slide people into this top elite tier because we don't know who to put there. Similar to last season with DeAndre Swift and Najee Harris, we were hoping that they were going to step up and they didn't. Not saying that Kenneth Walker is going to reflect that, but I think we're kind of stuck with a running back situation until we get a fresh flock of running backs, which hopefully this 2023 class is, to replenish the younger running backs. We're stuck with either having to go with youth, which is Kenneth Walker, Breece Hall, and Javonte Williams, guys like that, or we're having to go down the aged route, which is Mixon, Kamara, Henry, guys along those lines. And as I did on the running back recap show a few weeks ago, a lot of the top 12 running backs were over 25. There were 3 25 and younger running backs going into the 2023 season. That was Breece Hall, in points per game this was. Breece Hall, Josh Jacobs, and Saquon Barkley, 2 of which are 25 years old going into the 23 season. So I think that's where people are getting stuck, especially in drafts right now.
2 of which don't have a contract as well currently.
Exactly, yeah. I think it's quite interesting, the running back position right now.
it just shows you the changing landscape of running backs, not just in fantasy football, but in the NFL as well. And for fantasy football, it's an absolute nightmare.
Yeah.
The amount of teams that are now deploying a committee, and we don't know from 1 week to the next who's going to be the guy that's scoring the points. Whereas you think with like Jacobs and Saquon Barkley and Kenneth Walker and that, they've got the backfield kind of to themselves. Austin Eckler, another one, because obviously Spiller didn't do nothing this year, did he? And
no, he didn't.
Like after a very impressive college resume, and it was a nightmare landing spot for him behind one of the best running backs in the league and fantasy football. But it's all changing, and it's hard to predict without knowing if they stay where they are or where they're going. But with Kenneth Walker, we know that he'll be in Seattle next year.
Yeah, that is probably why he's going running back to now. As you said, the landscape across the running back, across all of the NFL is changing, and one of the guys that is going to feel that is Tyler Algier. I mean, we've got Cordero Patterson potentially being there at this time next. Sorry, let me start that again. Cordero Patterson's potentially going to be there in 2023. We don't know what is going to happen. He is under contract. They also save money by cutting him. It is only $2 million, so it's not too much. But Patterson didn't look great in the role that he was in this year. So do they cut ties with him, save that money, and go with Algier, who looked better in the role that they were trying to play? I think that is on the cards. I'm not saying it's going to happen, because if anyone tells you what is going to happen with an NFL team, they're lying. They have no idea unless it's coming from the team themselves. So that is an interesting situation to watch, especially with that quarterback. Again, we've already mentioned the Atlanta quarterback position with Desmond Ridder. We don't know what's going on there. So Algier could be leaned upon. Again, concern there is if they do cut Cordero Patterson, do they bring in another running back in the draft?
See, Tyler Algier was Kenneth Walker without the touchdowns. He went over 1,000 yards as well, 4.9 yards per carry. Run heavy Falcons suit him because he's more of a bulldozer. So he won't make you miss as much, but he will literally run through you. And his style is brilliant. I love it personally. But again, another one under the radar, because 1,000 yards as a rookie is no mean feat.
Exactly. Yeah, he was completely off people's radar. So the latter portion of the running backs, I'm going to go through these as are being drafted right now in January ADP. But my only comment on to all of these is just because there's nothing happening here. And that's why I've grouped them as such. Zamir White or Zeus, Hassan Haskins, Jerome Ford, Tyrion Davis-Price, Kyron Williams, Keontae Ingram, Pierre Strong Jr., Isaiah Spiller, who you mentioned earlier, Lewis, Snoop Connor, Ty Chandler, and Kevin Harris, all of which haven't done much at all. Some have shown bits here and there. Pierre Strong showed a good game. I think it was just one game, maybe it was two. Ty Chandler had some good preseason action and then got injured during the season. But all of these guys, I'm not sure what's going to happen. The only one that potentially has a bit more of a chance than the rest of having a bit more value this time next year is Zamir White. And I think that's because Josh Jacobs is going into free agency and they're potentially getting rid of Josh Jacobs. I'd expect so. So the Raiders then have no one at running back. And I think Zamir White could be their go-to, or he could be at least in a 50-50 situation with a drafted rookie.
Yeah, the other one, like we were talking about the changing landscape, the other one I think could have some sort of role, could be Kieran Williams as well. So if Akers is like the lead back, he's a pass catcher as well, Kieran Williams out of the backfield. So it gives another dynamic for Sean McVay. And, you know, if he's staying, I believe, with the Rams, and they're going to get Staff healthy, they're going to get Cup healthy, and they could utilize him in some sort of way. He didn't show it us when he had the chance, unfortunately, but he could have some sort of impact there.
Yeah. With that, that tiny portion of running backs out of the way, because I don't want to speak about them anymore. I think this is what you get from a rookie class: is you'll get the ones that show something year one, and then the rest of them are probably not going to do much for the rest of their careers. Let's move on to the wide receivers. So again, I'm going to split them up because there are even more wide receivers than running backs in this class. So we'll start off with the main 5 or 6. So Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Drake London, Treylon Burks. I've got George Pickens being drafted ahead of Jameson Williams right now. Christian Watson and Jahan Dotson. I know I said I'd start with a 5 or 6, but I also didn't realize Jahan Dotson was so far down on the list.
Yeah.
We'll start off with those guys because they were the ones that were solidly in the first round of drafts last year, or were hovering at least at the 201, 202 at maximum, or at latest stage. So, Lewis, let's dive in. Who do you want to go for?
Yeah, this ain't particularly because I think it's going to be straight away year 2 success story, but I'm going to go with Treylon Burks. Obviously, we mentioned the quarterback situation up in the air a little bit with Tennessee at the minute, but it's a similar story with Drake London. But the only difference is Treylon Burks, he had issues with settling in, then he had an injury as well. And the Titans are in a transition, but Burks' ADOT was over 11, his average depth of target, which is nice. His targets per route run was nearly a quarter of them. He was getting targeted on every route he ran, which is also very nice. So if his target share rises to around 25%, like Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, they're slightly higher than that, 26-ish. But if it raises to that next season, he could be in that sort of area with them, but a hell of a lot cheaper in your drafts.
Yeah, I think the exact same. As you can see on my notes, I think is a great buy. The one thing I will say is he's currently going as wide receiver 17, so he's almost being priced as such that he's already a great buy. So maybe he's not as good as I kind of thought he was. But if you can get him for a late first right now, that owner was probably doing that, and I kind of like that. If you can get him for 2 seconds, even better. I personally, with this class still shaping up, I wouldn't pay a mid-first for him, just because we haven't seen enough and we don't know what that QB situation is. But late first, early second, maybe 2 seconds instead of that first. I can't see a reason not to do that, apart from potentially Willis starting the entire season. A guy that I was massively high on that we're going to transition over to is Jameson Williams. He didn't do a lot because he tore his ACL in the college football playoffs, or towards the end of the college football season. I can't remember which one it was now, but that was impacting his return into, well, let's say return, his entry into the NFL. He was drafted highly in the top 10 by the Lions, and then missed a lot of the season. I think I saw a tweet earlier to say that he never saw above 25% snaps in any game, and I think he was active for about 4 games, so that's not a lot. But what I did want to mention was that he only had 3 touches all season, and all 3 touches went for over 40 yards. We've seen what Amon-Ra St. Brown can do in that offense. I've mentioned this before. I'm worried about Amon-Ra St. Brown keeping up his current production level. I think they can still do well, but when Jameson Williams gets up to speed, I feel like Jameson Williams is going to be used a lot, and it's not just going to be a deep threat like people think. So I think right now, if you can buy him, because that's going under the radar, people have just seen he's not really played that much this year. He's not scored any points, so I don't think he's necessarily dipped in value too much. So it's not because his value's dipped and therefore you need to buy it low. I think it's that it hasn't moved when it should have potentially had a bit more of a highlight on. If you can buy him for, again, late first 2 seconds, that's the sort of price I'm willing to pay. especially with this rookie class coming in that doesn't look overly strong at wide receiver from, again, just basing off some of the tweets I'm going through my rookie process at the moment. What do you think about Jameson Williams, Lewis? Do you think that he's a sneaky buy, or are you out? Because that seems to be the polarizing situation with him. You're either in or you're out with him.
I'm really neither, to be honest, because
as soon as I say polarizing, you end up going in the middle. I like that.
I literally am, and I have been the whole time because of the injury in the national championship, weren't it? But with Amon-Ra St. Brown being such an alpha there, and they're not bothered about losing the pass catching tight end, they're happy with their blockers there, because Jameson Williams will get phased more and more into that offense, and it will be the intermediate to deep sort of targets he will be getting. Amon-Ra will be in the slot most of the time, I'd imagine, without a tight end there. And I really think both of them could be similar to like Jefferson and Thielen when they was both top 15 last year and for fantasy football. And I really think they could, maybe not next year, or maybe Jameson Williams comes to life the back end of next year. We don't know how long he's going to take to properly integrate into that offense. But if I've got him, I'm holding him. You won't be having him off me. You'll have to really pay up. But I'm not even sure what you could send in way of picks for him at the moment that would be accepted.
Yeah, I think unless you're sending me the 101 to the 103 or 4 for him, I think the 104 is a debatable one right now because no one really knows who that running back is. Sneak peek into my film rankings right now as of this second, I've got Jahmyr Gibbs there. But I think that 104 is a hotly debated topic right now because it feels like a clear cliff before the NFL draft clears a few things up. So, yeah, I think 104 is about his cutoff. If you sent me the 105 or anything else, I'd be more inclined to hold. The last one on this list that I've mentioned so far is Christian Watson that I wanted to touch on. I think he's got this perception that he's boom bust because of him having a poor start to the season. He obviously dropped that first play of the season for the Packers that would have been a walk-in touchdown for him if he had caught that ball. I think with the 7 touchdowns in 4 games, that's where his boom bust persona comes from. That kind of, I don't know how to put it into words. People really put that onto him. I think the thing that people forget is that he had 3 100-yard games this season. One was in week 18 when he didn't score a touchdown, and the other 2 were in that stretch of the 7 touchdowns in 4 games. So that being said, I think that people are hating on him a little bit too much, although I don't see him being a top 12 wide receiver in a season-long format. I think that he can easily be a wide receiver 2 in a season-long format with that upside each week of being a top 12 wide receiver. I think that's what people are forgetting is maybe they're overly harsh on him. And people are kind of coming at Jahan Dotson is the guy that's being drafted after him at the moment in this rookie list. Also scored 7 touchdowns. But the difference is Jahan Dotson only had 1 game over 100 yards. And yes, the QB situation was worse in Washington. So Jahan Dotson is also a sneaky guy that could improve. And I think both of them have similar upsides. I think that Christian Watson gets that boom bust potential because people see him on the deep routes that are classified as a boom bust, but he does a lot more than that if you watch the whole game. Lewis, either Christian Watson or Jahan Dotson, do you have any comments there?
Yeah, I think obviously the quarterback situation, like you mentioned, was better for Christian Watson. Dotson in Washington, there was also a lot more mouths to feed because they had, at the start of the season, there was 2 pass-catching running backs there with Gibson and McKissick. They were sort of figuring out that you had Curtis Samuel, you had Terry McLaurin. I think
Completely agree.
Logan Thomas never started the season, did he? But
No, he didn't.
you know, there was a lot more mouths there in Washington, and even though he was getting only a couple targets, similar to Watson as well to start with, he was converting them. Like he had like 2 for 42 for 2 touchdowns or something 1 week, something like that. Anyway,
Yeah.
And but I think next year he really could step up and be the wide receiver 2 on his own team, and potentially like not far behind McLaurin.
Yeah, I think I'm just double checking. I believe Curtis Samuel's contract is either up or they can get out of it.
Get out cheap, I think. Yeah,
they can get out of it for about $6 million, which is potentially what you can do. Well, what they should do, because he's got a $13 million cap hit. Do you really want to be paying about 5% of the cap for Curtis Samuel? I don't feel like they do, but you know what? Ron Rivera's like with Samuel. But again, Dotson, one of the few things that kind of goes under the radar, especially with the kind of recency bias in people's heads, is that he had a 5-week stretch where he didn't play. He was injured during that 5-week stretch. So that kind of slips out of people's minds, which, again, I think that needs to be picked on a little bit more. Maybe some of these these wide receivers you can send offers out. Now let's move on to the rest. So we've got Sky Moore currently being drafted as the wide receiver 9, Wan'Dale Robinson, wide receiver 10, Alec Pierce, Khalil Shakir. Then John Mechie is still going decently high. He could come back in 2023. We don't know at this point, but I think we've seen positive signs there. Romeo Dobbs currently going as the wide receiver 14 in rookies, obviously. Tyquan Thornton, David Bell, Kyle Phillips, Calvin Austin, Danny Gray, Justin Ross, who was on IR for the entire season, Jalen Talbot, and Velus Jones for the Bears, going as the wide receiver 22 out of these rookies. So from Tyquan Thornton down to Velus Jones, I don't really have anything to say on those, but it was really the bottom or the top end of that list that I wanted to touch on. So like John Mechie, for example, guy that I was massively high on. I don't know whether you liked him, Lewis, but I was massively high, and unfortunately he did come. I think he was diagnosed with leukemia or a form of leukemia. It looks like we're potentially going to see him in 2023. That treatment has been going in the right direction or successful, one of the two. I don't have the reports in front of me. But if that is the case and we do see him in 23, I kind of want to send a late third or maybe even a fourth and a bench player to get Mechie, because I know he's going to be obtainable for people. And I think people paying a third last year aren't going to be too hung up about trying to keep him. Especially as it comes to the draft and the new rookies are the hype. I think you can easily sneak that under the radar.
Yeah, they'll feel like you're doing them a favor, giving them a 3rd round pick back. And, it's like getting a rookie anyway, isn't it? Because he hasn't played this season. But it's all changed for the Texans as well. So he ain't learning anything new, really. It's just going to be like coming in as a rookie, if he is good to go. I hope he is, because I was excited about him as well. Someone I was often targeting late in rookie drafts, but it'll be interesting to see anyway. And they're obviously going to have an improved quarterback situation. They could take a wide receiver as well in the first, maybe, but yeah, it's an interesting one and cheap anyway. It doesn't matter if it doesn't pan out.
Exactly, that's what I was going to say. So the other guy that I wanted to speak about from this list is Wan'Dale Robinson, Lewis. Now, he had a good stretch and he got injured. I believe he tore his ACL and he was out for the rest of the season. So I think people kind of get it into their heads that if they have 1 or 2 great weeks and become a wide receiver 12, that is his upside for a season-long format. I think that's what needs to change with that type of thinking, is that just because you have that upside each week doesn't mean it's going to happen over a season. I think Wan'Dale Robinson has wide receiver 2 potential, but I don't ever foresee him being a top 12 wide receiver. The Giants, we have no idea what they're going to do at quarterback. They're another team that have so many questions across the offense, but especially at quarterback. We don't really know what's going to happen there. So, Lewis, how do you feel about Wan'Dale? Were you targeting him at the start of last season?
No, not at all, to be honest with you. It's a shame because he did have them couple of flashes, and like you say, he has got a bit of upside. It's one of them that I'm thinking, like, damn, like I missed out there. But it's another one you can go and get cheap, I reckon.
Yeah. What would you send for him? Say an early third? You think that would get it done? Or do you think you need more?
Maybe a couple of thirds.
Yeah,
but like anything out of sort of the mid-second range, because I'm quite an aggressive Dynasty player. I like to win, and sometimes it don't work out that way. I like to win soon, but anything past sort of a mid-second, I'm not too bothered about really. And I wouldn't mind paying a couple of thirds for an upside sort of shot like that.
Is there anyone else on this list you wanted to speak about before we quickly gloss over the tight ends? Because as we spoke about pre-show, I'm not a huge fan of this tight end list.
No, so I mean, Khalil Shakir is being used a bit more in the playoffs. He could take Isaiah McDropsy's role next year, maybe. I don't mind spending a late pick there. Alec Pierce, I like him, but I think it could be a bit of a bias because of him and Ridder in college. That sort of deep threat, it was exciting. Do you know what I mean? But if the Colts get a good quarterback in the draft, it could be nice still. Maybe Alec Pierce, but that's about it, really, mate.
I mean, Paris Campbell is going in free agency unless they do sign into an extension, which I very much doubt with his injury history over the years. So Alec Pierce becomes the wide receiver 2 in that offense, provided they don't bring anyone else in or draft anyone. I think that he's got potential. I believe he had a second round draft capital as well. So that is always kind of aspired to for wide receivers, because if you have top 3 round draft capital, you tend to do or have a higher chance of the player hitting. So he was taken in the second round.
I think it was late second, wasn't it? But
it was late second.
Either way,
But that hit rate significantly increases in the second round. I'm not saying they all hit, because that's why it's called a hit rate. So Lewis, let's move on to the tight ends now. Everyone knows my stance on tight ends. It's tight end premium I don't like, but when I look at this list, I also don't like these tight ends because I don't foresee much in the near future for them. So currently being drafted in Dynasty startups, you've got Trey McBride as the tight end 1 from this rookie class. You've got Greg Dulcich, tight end 2, Cade Otton, Daniel Bellinger, Jelani Woods, who was my tight end love, I suppose. I don't really know how to say that. The tight end that I like the most behind Trey McBride. And you've also got Jake Ferguson to round out the list, and that is tight end 6 out of these. So I suppose the guy that has jumped the most is Cade Otton, and that was necessarily down to Cameron Brate not really doing much. But none of these tight ends really did a whole lot. Jelani Woods had a game. Daniel Bellinger had a few. Greg Dulcich had that stretch. But as I said to you pre-show, Lewis, I'm not excited by anyone. I'm going to hand it over to you so you can speak about who you want, and I'll dive right in.
Naturally, unless it's sort of a Travis Kelce or a Mark Andrews sort of thing, you're not interested in tight ends really. But I'm a tight end enthusiast. I like to look for the good in the rough, And Jake Ferguson, I mean, I can't see the Cowboys re-signing Dalton Schultz, and I really like him too, but I can't see that. Dak does use his tight end. He's the one I'm most excited about out of this group going forward, actually, out of the 6 of them, because Ertz is going to be there next year, as we was talking about pre-show, so McBride will likely be dust again for another year or two. As he was when Ertz weren't on the field, he was dust anyway. But yeah, Jake Ferguson, he was on the field in every game but one as a rookie as well. He didn't necessarily command the targets, but when he did get targeted, his hands were great. He caught 19 of 22 in the 16 games. Couple of touchdowns in there. He only ran 83 routes on nearly 500 snaps he played, but he was targeted on over a quarter of those routes he ran. So every time he was available, he was getting the ball one quarter at a time, and over 2 yards per route ran as well, which is nice, especially for a tight end.
It is the only concern I have for Jake Ferguson, sorry to jump in there, is the amount of free agents. Do you share that? Do you share that concern?
Now, there's a few, but I can't see the Cowboys paying one. That's the only thing. Jerry likes the razzmatazz and all that, doesn't he? And a tight end doesn't give you that. So unless he's going out and trading for Travis Kelce, which won't happen, then I can't see him paying someone like Mike Gesicki or Evan Engram maybe, or someone, but I can't see him doing that. But so when Schultz is out of the way this offseason, I think it could, even next year, could be a year 2 breakout. Thanksgiving, the game against the Cowboys and against the Giants, where he leaped over the D-back on a long catch and run. He's got it, and he's the one I'm excited about going forward.
Yeah, I mean, as a late round speculative take in a startup, then yeah, I completely get it. I wouldn't really trade anything for him. If you can get him thrown in, brilliant, but it's not something that I'm actively looking for. Looking at free agents, you've got Mike Gesicki, Dalton Schultz, and Evan Engram, who were all paid over $9 million last year. Obviously, the first 2 were franchise tagged, so those 3 are probably going to command that sort of value again. Mike Gesicki probably not as much, just because of the nature of last season. He didn't do very well, as we mentioned on last week's show. And then after that, you've got Austin Hooper, Robert Tonyan, Hayden Hurst, and then a bunch of guys you don't want as your tight end one. I'd be quite worried if you were. The only one I can kind of see on this list is Irv Smith, who is quite far down in terms of what he was paid last year, because he was still on that rookie contract. But if he's your tight end one, I'm not overly keen on that. So that being said, are they any better than Jake Ferguson? I'd say everyone that I've said is, apart from Irv Smith. I think Irv Smith, especially with the injury, we're still unsure on whether he's going to do anything. And all of these guys that I've mentioned are like the top 3 out, but the rest of them, so Austin Hooper, Robert Tonyan, Hayden Hurst, they were all paid $6 million or less. And in fact, Austin Hooper was $6 million, Robert Tonyan 3.7, and Hayden Hurst 3.5. So if you can get a guy like one of those 2 on a 3.5, 3.7, $4 million deal, that's not a bad move to make. And unfortunately, it would push Jake Ferguson into that tight end 2 role. But I do appreciate your optimism with the tight end. I think that for free, you may as well try and get that value increase.
See the thing with all 3 of them players that you mentioned, yeah, and we've seen it this season because Hooper and Tonyan were non-existent for the most part. They all rely on touchdowns.
Yeah.
Hayden Hurst ain't putting up 100 yards a game, but he was snagging the ball in the end zone from Joe Burrow most of the year, because it was another option to Higgins, Boyd, and Chase. And it was crazy how good their offense is. But
yeah,
so, and like I said before, Jerry ain't going to want to pay a tight end. They might be cheap. I could see Tonyan returning to the Packers most likely because they know what they got there. I don't know what you think, but with the others. See, even the Bengals could probably get Hayden Hurst in even cheaper than they had him this year and draft the rookie tight end for a bit of mentorship kind of thing.
Yeah, I do see your point. It just really depends on what Jerry wants to do. As you said, Jerry is a very, very flamboyant GM. He likes to do things by the media rather than trying to just get things done. I think the one that you slightly touched on there was Trey McBride. We mentioned pre-show that he's still got 2 years left on his deal. Wanted to bring that into the show. Still got 2 years left on his deal, and he does have an out after this year, but it's not a huge cost saving. So I think that you could potentially see Ertz for 2 years. Equally, I think it's a 50-50 chance you're only seeing for one. And do we think Trey McBride takes that step? Potentially. So I think I'm 50-50 on when we're going to see Trey McBride. And if we do see Trey McBride, are we going to get what we expected? I don't think that any of these guys are going to be like a TJ Hawkinson, where they're going to spend a season outside of the top elites. From this class, we're basically looking at a bunch of top eights and below that's their ceiling. Lewis, before we get out of here, you have a Dynasty tip for us. So let's share that, and then I'll share the brain teaser for the end.
Yeah, see, I mean, like I said earlier, I play quite aggressively with Dynasty, and it don't always pan out. But the main thing is play how you enjoy it, and be active in the leagues, because that's the main reason for me is why Dynasty leagues dry up and people leave and they get nukes in the end and things like that. Is just enjoy yourself, really, and play the way you want to play. If you want to send an extra pick or whatever, it doesn't matter what anyone else says. Send what you want and enjoy yourself, really. And that's my tip for it. Be active.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. So the brain teaser I've got for you this week, and Lewis, I'll give you a guess, but I'm not going to tell you the answer. So that the brain teaser is which rookie that is drafted in both May 2022 startup ADP and January 2023 startup ADP rose the most. So that is 2022 rookie, obviously. And we have said his name on this show, so that gives you some sort of a clue. So I'll repeat that again. So which rookie rose the most, and that rookie was drafted in both 2022 ADP in May and 2023 ADP in January. So Lewis, do you have any guesses? Again, I'm not going to tell you an answer.
I am going to go with Bailey Zappi.
Interesting. It's one of the guys I thought people would go for.
He is, so that means it's wrong.
I didn't say it was wrong.
He seems to be getting drafted really high, and it's just Mac Jones 2.0, really.
He does. I completely agree with you, but I'm not going to tell you the answer. So before we get out of here, guys, one thing from me and the rest of the 5 Yard family is Murph is has not only posted the FFCC 2023 information, so go over to his account at Murph_NFL, I believe it is, on Twitter. So that's all the FFCC 2023 information. There's some new stuff. The new charity is all up on there, so go have a look. And the Super Bowl preview show that Murph has done is out this week. It will be out by the time this show is out on your podcast waves. So if you haven't listened, go over and listen to it. I think it's about 5 hours long. He's got some cracking guests. He's got the Fast Action Friday guys, Lewis included. It's got some, I believe, a Super Bowl winning quarterback and some of the and one of the Sky Sports team for the UK. So make sure you listen to it. There is plenty of stuff going on that. As I said, 5 hours longer. There's going to be some snippets coming out later this week as well. So That's it, everyone. Thank you for listening. Thanks, Lewis, for joining. And until next week, as Lewis said, be active and have fun in your leagues. See you later.